for giving up an hour of your Monday evenings to be here. And yeah, I guess also thank you to the Climate Fringe for all the work they do and the events they put on over this month. It's an amazing thing, and for helping to promote this event too. So before we begin and before Juanita and Sandra get discussing, I'll just give kind of a brief background both on them and then the Third Generation Project. So TGP, Third Generation Project, we are an award-winning international think tank with the mission of providing education on the social problems underlying and coming out of the climate crisis. And we are based kind of within the School of International Relations at the University of St Andrews. And we have a variety of programming. Some is focused kind of within the university, within St Andrews, and others is more kind of outward thinking. So as an example of one of our kind of university-based programming, which is relevant to today's event, we've got the Emerging Researchers Program, and that's it's a workshop series followed by a research project. It focuses on critical theory, methods and methodology and practice before the students go and conduct their own research projects. And they've done an amazing variety of different things. I'd highly recommend checking some of that out. We've got on our website and on our YouTube a presentation event that was done earlier this year by some of the students, and it was a whole number of different things. So related to climate justice and education themes. So yeah, I'd highly recommend checking that out. And so Juanita, who will be talking here today, she is an alumni of that program. She is from Bogota in Colombia, and was at St Andrews doing an undergraduate degree in international relations and social anthropology. After which she went down to the University of Oxford to do a master's in Latin American studies, and now works as a human rights consultant at Stop the Traffic, which is an anti-human trafficking coalition based down in London. So alongside another one of our programs, alongside the Emerging Researchers Program, is we have a blog called The Front Line, which is it's a space for people and communities on the front lines of the climate crisis and climate injustice to tell their own stories. This can also be found on our website, and the latest edition was an interview with Sandra. And Sandra, as a bit of background, has devoted her life to fighting for climate justice in Colombia. In 2021, she was part of the University of Dundee's Scottish Human Rights Defenders Fellowship in the social sciences. She has extensive experience organising rural communities, protecting ancestral knowledge, and on farming, on sustainable agro-ecological practices through research, human rights education, and so much more. So Sandra works to implement international standards in environmental protection, organic production models, and fair trade standards in her community through grassroots advocacy. And we're so delighted that she contributes to our blog and is now here today to speak with Juanita. So I guess, without further ado, Juanita, Sandra, please take it away. And I hope you all enjoy the next hour and get thinking about questions for the two of them for afterwards.
Okay, thank you, Jamie and Annabelle, and thanks to TGP for giving us this opportunity to have this event as well. So I just wanted to kind of start with a little bit of kind of introduction to the first question, which is like the peace agreement between the Colombian government and the FARC was signed 6 years ago. And one of the primary conditions under which the guerrillas laid down their arms was that the government agreed to implement a comprehensive rural reform. This included facilitating alternative livelihoods to shift communities away from their reliance on coca growing and replace the income that militia groups once provided, as well as building infrastructure and improving access to education. So I wanted to start with asking Sandra, what has been the impact of that agreement on rural communities, including those involved in coca production?
Yeah, thank you, Juanita. So to answer that question, it's important to talk about this peace process in Colombia, which started in 2012 after many attempts of peace agreements with FARC guerrillas. And in 2012, Colombia began a peace process with these guerrillas. And this process provides a relative calm in the territories, gradually decreasing the violence and the actions of the armed groups. And so between 2012 and 2016, it was possible to work with the community, raising awareness about the importance of producing in a clean and respectful way with the environment, talking about human rights and land rights, promoting democracy and participation. And as a consequence of this, it was possible to start associative work with different indigenous and peasant communities in the southern Colombia, generating spaces for conversation around peace, reconciliation, and voluntary crop substitution, as you say, between coca crops to coffee or cocoa crops. If we take into account that these communities inhabit the Cañón de las Hermosas, a mountainous area where the FARC guerrillas were born and which was marked for too many years by extreme violence with bombings, disappearances, massacres, anti-personnel mines, and the inclemency of natural disasters, the peace negotiations and their subsequent agreement allow the communities that have historically been characterized by high levels of poverty to begin to take part in decision-making in the territories and as part of a social justice strategy. So in 2016, Colombia signed this beautiful peace agreement on which many of us base our hopes and bent on true reconciliation with life and with the territory. Unfortunately, in 2018, Colombia changed its president. So the new president, Iván Duque, who was negligent in the implementation of the agreements, started generating discontent on the part of some former FARC combatants, and they started new armed groups and returned to the territories under the name of FARC dissidents. So these brought more violence in the territories. So after the peace agreement and without the implementation of this peace agreement, our Colombian peace agreement with FARC guerrillas can be just a beautiful, beautiful piece of paper, but nothing can change for the communities.
Talking about how the change that happened in 2018, I was wondering if what was the experience that you had working directly with the communities when perhaps like crop substitution programs are stopped or they were started, and there are just like challenges to continue them growing, expanding across the country, and I think that goes related to another question that I had, which was how fragmented can we talk about this progress happening across the country?
Yeah, once Iván Duque started his presidency in 2018, we start facing this instability in the territories with new violences, with new armed groups. So all the associations, peasant associations that were in the territories start facing issues because once an armed group appear in the territory, they start asking for war taxes and to each inhabitant in the territory, but also they establish the rules. And normally those rules are related with freedom to speak or freedom to participate as community or to be part of decision making. So the association that I was part starts suffering pressure, and many of the participants, families participants in this association, start having fear because the FARC dissidents start asking to stay in the village, to stay at home, but not going to the workshops, not attending any kind of training or receiving visits from me or from people that was meant to train them in different practices, agroecological practices or social practices. So definitely since 2018, the situation in the territories in the rural Colombia changed because also all of us who were visible for the community and for the authorities and for the armed groups in that time start being targeted. And despite we went to the authorities and made let the authorities know that these new dissidents appear in the territories, the governments, national and local governments, denied the presence of FARC dissidents, and they denied the protection to the communities and for all of us who were leading this process around peace and reconciliation and crop substitution. So the situation turned very violent, and since that we start having this problem with many aggressions to activists defending territory, defending environment, working in the rural areas. And as a result, many different organizations start reporting the situation in Colombia. And sadly, one of those organizations put Colombia as the first country in the most dangerous country to defend the environment, according with Global Witness last report in 2021, September 2021. So the situation is not changing. Sorry.
No. I was just going to say that I think that provides like a really good background to everyone in this call, because obviously you're thinking, okay, there is this peace process in place and the idea to have a rural reform as part of it. But I think a key question in that is how we are doing that rural reform, and in the face of issues such as like climate change, right? That has already been a topic, and I think the peace process in the mind of a lot of people, it kind of seemed like a good opportunity to rethink how we were doing things in the countryside. How do we do a rural reform? And to start talking about this a little bit, how is climate change already impacting the rural communities that you were working with?
Well, these communities are territories rich in biodiversity, so the natural resources are abundant. But also there is a lack of basic services such as drinking water, energy, health, or education. They are just isolated without any presence of the Colombian state. And these territories are marked by decades of violence and natural disasters. So now the world is talking about climate change, but these communities have been suffering its effects long before it was talked about. So effects as constant landslides that bury houses and entire families or communities, floods, erosions that affect crops and provide hunger to these communities. But also we need to recognize that the large extractivist corporations, the food industry, the agrochemical industry, the narco-traffic corporations are the main responsible for the climate crisis and its effects in my country, at least. So if you allow me, I can tell you that the effects of climate change in these communities in particular have been natural disasters that I mentioned, plus violence, that war in which communities are forced to be in the middle because there will always be economic interests of large international corporations supporting the conflict to achieve their objectives and exploit the last natural resource of Colombia.
I think that, and as you were saying, you have really strong actors that you need to kind of fight against in that process of trying to protect their own environment, such as the economic interests that are posing in a territory that is as diverse as the one that we have in Colombia. And in that sense, I think that grassroots movements in Colombia have been strong even before the peace process was signed. And they, if anything, I think from what I've seen, they have just been getting stronger, and the movement has grown in terms of collaboration. So I was wondering, what are the communities doing to mitigate the impacts of climate change from before and now that we seem to have this peace opportunity to do it alongside key actors?
Yeah. So as you say, yes, these organizations, the community organizations that have been in the grassroots in Colombia, in the rural Colombia, they have been so keen to protect the environment because it is part of their DNA. It is part of their ancestral knowledge, is their heritage. And they have been doing this for decades. But with the peace process, many communities began to empower themselves through associative work and to prepare themselves with environmental sustainability projects, such as the ones I was mentioning at the beginning. And then they were returning to their harmonious and respectful relationship with the environment. So the community work was strengthened during the transition from production with agrochemicals to agroecology, that conventional production to returning to the roots, to the ancestors' activities or ancestral way to produce or to have a relationship with the soil. It is important to recognize they were having these associations to also implement new ways to respect or new social practices, respecting or recognizing also rights, human rights in general, but also land rights, the right to belong and to be part of the territory, the right to decide about that territory and the resources, and also the rights of children and the rights of women to participate, to be part of the community, to be owners of the lands. So this new activity allow the community to be able to mitigate the effects of climate change. We cannot erase the effects. As I say, these communities have been facing these issues for many years, and they used to cry on silence because their lives were not valued. Like, well, it was God, it was nature, it was fate. But now these communities start working together and thinking beyond, being prepared, being prepared for the harvest, being prepared for the different seasons, and trying to stay strong to face these issues. With the absence of the state in these territories and the return of the armed groups, it is very difficult to establish sophisticated mitigation strategies. But the communities that live there, as I say, they have that in their blood, in their DNA. So they do what they can with their own means to protect what should interest us all.
And I think that's really, that's a valuable insight of putting of value, and of just like valuing the experiences of people on the ground, right? That they have that knowledge that other people just don't. And when in that process of working together, returning to the roots that you are talking about, you have been promoting agroecology as a kind of a strong perspective or lens to look at how we're doing that in Colombia. So I was thinking if you can tell us a little bit about agroecology and then how it is being implemented in rural Colombia.
Yes, agroecology for me is this respectful relationship between humans and the environment, where I as human understand that I am aware that I can survive in this planet by producing with my hands on the ground, remembering that each and every one of the elements of the ecosystem are important and provide balance to the cycle of life. Just as the fruit of the tree is important, the population of microorganisms that inhabit the soil is important. So without them, there would be no fruit to eat or to sell. So agroecological practices in general terms are those that in a respectful and sustainable way combine the soil, plants, air, bodies of water, animals, and man. So implementing agroecology is to create awareness among the inhabitants about how harmful it is to produce with agrochemicals, and also to grow modified seeds, genetically modified seeds. It is to create awareness about the importance of protecting soil fertility through compost with natural waste from the same plants. It is to produce in a small scale. It is intercropping crops and farm animals. It is also ensuring the sustenance of families before taking the products to international markets. It is also food security and food sovereignty as well.
I think when you were talking about agroecology, I find it a very like holistic and complete way of trying to integrate and face the challenges of climate change, right? But also, when I was reading the blog that you did with Annabelle, I was wondering, how do we kind of scale up agroecology in a country like Colombia or many in Latin America, where you have big opposition from agrochemical corporations, from the need to buy genetically modified foods because sometimes they're cheaper, and I think if we look at it in a bigger picture in terms of the market and economics, is how do we measure that? How do we balance that relationship between providing crops that pay the farmers or the peasants what is needed for their labor, their manual labor, with the competition of putting those commodities in the market, and how that investment works in terms of commerce and trade. I'm kind of interested in, what do we need to do to scale that up when you have all these different actors surrounding these agroecology programs?
Well, it is not an easy work. It's, as you stated, we have a lot of opposition to this kind of production, but also we have new markets. Consumers are always asking for better products. Consumers are no more conscious about how healthy they want to buy and eat their food. They know now that the food could be their own medicine. So in that way, we can create these markets for small producers to keep producing under agroecology practices, under organic production, for example, and ensuring there are consumers interested just in buy food that has been produced without any kind of agrochemical. But it's not easy because also the food industry and the agrochemical industry are so powerful, and they have interests also in the local governments in Colombia. And so they try to say and to obligate the peasants and the indigenous communities to produce under these conventional systems with lots of synthetic inputs and modified seeds. And also, many of them have been criminalized in Colombia. Because also we have these trade agreements with the United States, where we are obligated to buy modified seeds coming from the United States, and also the agrochemicals coming from the United States. So we are making them rich, but also we are affecting our own soils, and we are being unfertile, and we are losing our food sovereignty, just disappearing our natural seeds. But the good news is it's not impossible. There are many associations, indigenous and peasants associations in Colombia, doing this, raising awareness in the peasants and making this opposition to the governments, trying to find new markets and trying to find the consumers that are expecting to have other products, better products, not a lot, not in quantity, but in quality. And I think this last pandemic, COVID, left us this knowledge, that we need to really find good food, healthy food, not just fruits, not just buy food and eat food. It's just to find the way that this food was produced. And then it's just the only way we can start scaling this production when we have a higher demand of this kind of products. We can start motivating and inviting more farmers to be part of the associations and selling the products in the international markets and providing to the farmers or the peasants, small producers, better livelihoods to keep doing the same thing, to keep the agroecology practices.
I think from what you were mentioning, I think I took 4 keywords that I think link really well with the next question. And you mentioned a lot, creating new markets, consumers, greater awareness, and the importance of knowledge, right? Of knowing that we need to rely more on our own products and what is the food that we're eating, where is it coming from, where are the consequences that it's having, kind of going through all the chain from when we get some potatoes to where we get it from. And I think that goes really well with your work with communities has been beyond, or has gone beyond agroecology to wider education and community development, which I think is related to this growing awareness and the idea of why creating markets is being successful. So why did you feel this was important to go beyond just agroecology practices, particularly to achieve social and climate justice for these communities?
Yeah, it is important that the community has information and has access to education. Only in this way, each individual become aware that they are subjects of rights. And if they are subjects of rights, that they also know they have responsibilities towards humanity, as we say, being responsible in the way they are producing the food, but also responsibilities with the environment and nature in general. So by giving the communities the opportunity to educate themselves, it's promoting human rights, it is generating protection for children, it is generating gender equality, it is attending to the needs of communities that have been suffering the effects of the climate crisis at its maximum. And we know they are not the main guilty people of this crisis, and it is they don't represent the large consumer markets. So the fact that the inhabitants of rural communities have access to education allows them to dream far away, believe in other realities, feel masters of their destiny, and change those present as part of the decision-making process. That is also climate justice, starting to care for those who have been suffering because of our excessive consumption.
Wondering, from what you were saying, the way that I understand it is that the education process has been more kind of starting from the communities, going broader, right? So it's more of like an internal process, more like community-based learning and creation of awareness. And I was wondering if there is any space that you have seen in Colombia where these teachings and this education aspect can be included at a national level. So is there any way in which this education from the communities can be connected with, I don't know, changes to the curriculum, or are we teaching these in general at schools in Bogota, for example, about the situation of communities in the Cauca region? And I was just wondering if that's happening, or if you have had any thoughts about it.
Well, In Colombia, mainly in cities, I don't have a lot of experience, but I know in Bogota, is the Liceo Femenino. It's a school just for girls, and they have girls from 5 years until 21 or more. And mainly they are girls displaced by violence, and they come mainly from rural communities. So they have been facing this violent situation and all the human rights violations, but also they have this sense of belonging to the communities, to the grassroots communities. In those spaces, in that school, I have seen they try to implement this knowledge. But different to other countries, for example, in Guatemala, I have not seen in Colombia, they are changing the curriculum, like in the public schools, trying to implement the ancestral knowledge or the knowledge from peasants' traditions. Sadly, it is not happening. Let's see what happens in the future.
I think is a valuable kind of vacuum that could be filled, and it would just contribute to the bigger goal. So if we move to the next question, obviously we have a change in presidency in Colombia very recently, and now Gustavo Petro is the new president, and he's the country's first ever president from the left. So do you have an opinion on what his election will mean for the communities that you work with and the achievement of climate justice in Colombia?
Yeah, I have hope. I need to have hope. I think all of us who are in this session, we are believers or dreamers. So this is the first step in the elections, and it shows us that society is changing, and the new generations are being more aware and are taking ownership of their present and their future. I trust that Petro will make decisions that tend to protect rural communities and the environment. But I am also aware that there are many dynamics, such as the international interests of powerful corporations over our natural resources, high levels of impunity, violence, multiple armed groups in different territories, and corruption in different levels of the government. So all of these add to the narco-traffic business, makes that dreamer mentality put it like a feet on ground, and think that the election of Petro is just a very small first step for transformation. But we need to hope that the international dynamics and institutions and business and society support this first step, and then we can start seeing small changes. But I think the transformation, to see a big transformation in our society, in our country, it could take at least 10 years more.
Yeah, wow. Important thing is that it doesn't seem like you guys are losing any hope or any action yet. So that's a good step. Not to continue having hope and action and willingness is a good combination in this situation, I think. So now, kind of before we finish, I think it was nice for the audience, if you could tell us a little bit about the risks of being a climate activist in rural Colombia.
Yeah, so it's being stigmatized by governments, not having protection from state institutions that should protect citizens, being targeted by armed groups that control the territory where you are working with the community, being persecuted, being displaced and losing everything, being attacked themselves or their families, being disappeared or being tortured and murdered, and in the case of women, being sexually assaulted using the female body as an instrument of punishment or war instrument, to show the community and especially to show the women a lesson because they raise their voices. So being just another number in the statistics and suffering the impunity of the Colombian state, what makes the violent feel that they can do the same thing over and over and again without without any kind of justice. And so protecting the environment in Colombia means loving the territory, loving the culture, loving the ancestral knowledge that we have, our culture, loving the biodiversity, loving humanity, because we are doing this for not just for Colombian people, for everyone living in this world, wanting a better world, wanting a fair society for all of us. And it's also losing the life or living in exile.
I think obviously this goes is a deeper question in Colombia's history. But do you, from your experience that you've been doing this for a long time, have you seen any change in terms of accountability and justice in Colombia? The way that that awareness is growing, the fact that we have treaties, like the Escazú Agreement, and there's more focus on the environment, and we have had the COP. Is there any change that you have seen in terms of accountability in Colombia? Not really.
I think the change is the society, the inhabitants are being more aware about what they own. So that is the reason, because we are facing more aggressions. That's the reason, because the violence are being more violent. Because just the community and the society stop feeling comfortable with this situation, and they start thinking it belongs to us, and we will fight for this. And I'm seeing the new generations being so brave and owing their future. So yes, I think the situation is changing in a positive way. Sadly, many of our friends, brothers in this work have lost their lives or have suffered attacks or are, as me, in other country. But also is the hope that the new generations are more brave, and they are just taking on their hands the future and going in other direction, not being just obedient to the orders of people with power, with the power of money, with the power of weapons. Is losing the fear to lose the life, is having fear to live a life without rights, without a decision, without their own future. And yes, I think the Escazú Agreement is a big tool for Latin America, and as part of my hope in Petro's government is we return to ratify that agreement and start driving in that direction. But as I say, we need to wait. Petro just started his government in last August, and it's quite early to know. And also we know politicians, they have a lot of issues and deals to get in the power, so we need to take time to see.
I think that just before we finish, to let the audience ask any questions, if you guys have any questions, I think that talking about the power of youth and future generations, the last question that I wanted to ask you to close was, how can individuals in our audience and global civil society learn from and support rural communities in Colombia to achieve social justice? For example, from here, like how can I, as a consumer, as a person that doesn't live in Colombia, or the people that may be in this call as well, how can we, what is the call for action on that?
Yes. So this is the first step, to be aware that other realities exist. They're in a country like mine, where people give up their lives to defend what belongs to all of us, the air, the water, the ground. They are three elements without which the human being could not survive. And it is that and not other things that we should protect, these three elements. So that move us to protect these grassroots communities, because these communities are daily, each minute in direct relation with these three elements, air, soil, and water. How to support? First, always think about the origin and history behind a product before you buy that. Reduce consumption. You know, many times we are big consumers. Even when we think we are not, we are consuming a lot. Talk to your family and to your friends about these realities, about my country, what is happening in this country called Colombia and there in South America. Use your social media to raise awareness in other people. Also put pressure in your governments in the face of the cooperation agreements you have with my country or with Latin American countries. The UK has big agreements with Colombia, sending a lot of money to support rural communities, but those resources are not seen in our rural communities, are just in different levels and other places, but not in the communities. Be interested in knowing how the resources that your country sends are invested is to be part of this process, to ask to your governments how much we are sending and what is the result, a control of the process. Also, pressure multilateral organizations to make decisions to protect life and not to protect economic interests of large corporations. For those more bold or daring, travel to my country, get to know the reality firsthand. And in this way, many alliances can come true. Many cooperations are created, going just in the field and knowing the real story. See the speech by Gustavo Petro, our new president, at the United Nations General Assembly that was last week, I think. And do not get tired of participating in these kind of events. Listen and spread the voices of others. We can always do something from the level in which we move.
Thanks, Sandra. I think that gives us plenty of homework to start thinking of, at least for me and for everyone in the call, I hope. And yeah, I don't know if anyone in the audience has any questions before we finish the call.
So I have just enabled, I'm trying to enable all of your mics. So you can turn them on if you want to ask a question, or you can also ask a question in the Q&A. Yeah, I'll just give it a minute. Otherwise, I have a question as well.
Annabelle, do you want to ask your question first?
Sure, I'll go ahead with my question. So I was wondering. So I was thinking the trust that communities have in government must be pretty broken at this point. After so many years of conflict and after kind of the peace agreement was signed and the change that they were hoping for didn't come, and then as you're saying, like with the resurging violence, you've tried to notify the government, and the government has done the opposite of protect communities. They've targeted environmental defenders in their rhetoric. I mean, the past government. And so now that we have this new government, this left-wing government for the first time, I mean, bearing in mind what you said about kind of the limited change perhaps we might expect, but that it's going in the right direction. I wonder, I feel like these communities must still have such a broken trust relationship with the government. Like what needs to happen so that trust can be rebuilt, that bridge can be built again? And so I imagine that working with kind of government at different levels, if the government is trying to do the right thing, it's going to be really important, but also really difficult in this climate. And I wonder what needs to, what kind of needs to happen now.
Well, what needs to happen is to stop the violence. So this new president is speaking about a new peace agreement again. And if that happens, we need to implement to accomplish what is written in that peace agreement. I think now the communities are having a little more of trust in the government, just because he's from the left wing, and also he was a guerrilla former. So there is a kind of hope that things could be different, but the violence is increasing because it is not just about the president, it's about also the local governments that are very corrupt, but it's also about many different corporations having presence in the territories, like mining and fracking, and putting a lot of finances in the conflict, specifically to have the community control it and being able to make decisions of the resources. But I think the communities are now trusting more. And that situation, we face a similar sensation between 2012, and that was possible between 2012 2017. So that could be possible again. But what needs to be done is accomplish what is said. And the Colombian history showed that always the government asked for a peace agreement, then the president or all of those in the power, they didn't implement the agreements. And that has been the cycle of violence in Colombia.
Thank you, Sandra. Jamie, do you have a question?
I do. Well, actually, I have a question on behalf of Ali, whose internet is a bit patchy, so has sent this over. So he says, "Hi Sandra, hi Juanita. Sorry, bad connection. Thank you so much for this. You mentioned what youth and students can do. Colombia is somewhere that has seen lots of researchers examining both the peace process and thinking about reconciliation, examining political actors, etc. Is there something that researchers can do with the avenues that they have open to them that is in addition to what young people and students can do?"
Well, I think a very important thing to do when you are making a research is develop your research in an academic way, but also go in the practice, go into the ground. And, you know, if you focus your research in Colombian dynamics, and you achieve the way to go to travel and be in a community, you will have from the origin, the real situation, and you will invite the community to be part of your research. So probably your result will be more valuable if you make the community part of your research. You listen to the community and you recognize that the communities, they have knowledge too, different to the knowledge you have in the academy, but a knowledge that will be so important for you as researcher or as a student.
Sandra, I don't know if anyone else has any other questions that they would like to ask, or
I have one final one, and then I guess if there's nothing else, I can close after that. But my quick final question was, I guess thinking it goes back to Sandra when you were talking about agroecology in rural communities. I was just thinking about for kids in urban communities, how easy / how possible / what kind of ways can urban communities really engage with agroecology when it's something that is perhaps slightly distant to them geographically and kind of physically and mentally?
I'm sorry, I lose the question. Can you please tell me, or maybe you, Juanita? I'm so sorry. My English is is improving, but not that.
No, I think, Jamie, you were just asking like how people that are not necessarily very close to agroecology practices or like to in that environment, what can they do, right? Was that the aim of your question?
Yeah, how people in urban communities can engage with agroecology.
Yeah.
In Colombia and across the world.
Okay, so people that are not from the community.
Yeah, so people that are, like in the urban centers. So.
Okay, urban. I'm sorry, I was not understanding that word.
Like Bogota or Cartagena. Like, how do we? How can we engage if we don't necessarily, work in the land? We are not in the countryside. I guess what can we do from our side?
You are the consumer.
Yeah.
You are people with the money to support the livelihoods of the communities. So the answer is buying, always local, buying peasant markets, farmer markets, always trying to support. I know could be more expensive, not in Colombia, but I know in the UK could be more expensive, but you are supporting these strategies to protect the environment, to protect the soil, and you are supporting these people that are just working for that just because they love the land. they love our planet. So it could be a little bit more expensive, but will be healthy for you, and you will be really supporting these kind of strategies. And in the same way, to support Colombia, you can always find products. I don't think they have the sale of made in Colombia, but like Rainforest Alliance or Fair Trade or Organic Production, NOP, USDA. You can find those labels. So they are very strict in these kind of activities, and they always control that the associations are really working in the way they are asking, like ensuring the final consumer they are respecting the environment and the social practices.
Thank you, Sandra. Yeah, I think that's something that we have in the UK. I've seen it in a couple of products when you go to supermarket and stuff like that. So keep an eye for that as well. Do you want to go, Jamie?
Yeah, no. Just to finish off, I just want to say a massive thank you to both of you for that. What I found absolutely fascinating talk. Honestly, it was incredible, and there's a lot there to digest and meditate on and take away. So thank you both. Thank you everyone for coming as well. We'll say, as I say, we really appreciate you coming along to listen to this. And you can follow the Third Generation Project on Twitter at Third Gen Project and keep up to date with our socials there, Instagram, Facebook, everywhere. We also have a newsletter. If you're interested in signing up, then drop the attached email that was on this Eventbrite page a link. We do them quarterly, so if you want to stay in the loop and find out what we're doing and future events such as this one, then please do let us know. But again, yeah, thank you all so much for coming, and have a lovely week, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the Climate Fringe as well. There's still lots of cool events for the next few days.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Sandra, as well.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.